Welcome back to the channel. Before I start the garden tour for this week, I thought I'd share a little bit about what's going on around here past couple of weeks. So it has been really windy, and a couple times it has caused a dust storm from a nearby field and left a lot of dirt and everything everywhere. So it's been hard to kind of get outside with all the wind and the dirt. So to do my soil blocks that I wanted to try, because I haven't tried them before, I went in one of my buildings because you need to sift the peat moss and the compost. And you can see why you need to sift it. You don't want all of these clumps to be in your block. And it worked pretty good to just use this wire that I had to get all those clumps broken up. The recipe I used is from the Seasonal Homestead, and you need 8 gallons, so I was just using a 5-gallon bucket to kind of measure how much I had, and it creates quite a bit. This tote is pretty full and pretty heavy. So I haven't tried these soil blocks before. Like I said, I'm using what's on the Seasonal Homestead to go off of, and she said you need it wet, and the more moisture is better than being too dry. So that was kind of the idea I was going with, was to get it really wet and see how the soil blocks worked with it being pretty wet. And it took quite a bit of water to get everything really wet. And then I'm using the capillary mat on my tray to keep the moisture on the block. So this, like I said, this is the first time I've used it. Those little things inside create the dimples in the top of the soil block to put your seed on, which is pretty handy. And so the first time I tried to put it in and pulled it up, and there was nothing inside. It was so wet that it didn't even stick inside. So a little bit too much water. So I started kind of scooping it into the block maker, and that got it compressed enough that the blocks held, and push down on the handle and the blocks pop out real nicely. This is the 1.5 inch, so it makes 5 little blocks and worked pretty good. I just had a little too much moisture in my soil, so I added some more of the dry to get some of that extra moisture after trying it a few times, and was able to kind of figure out what kind of mixture I needed. You want it pretty wet, but not so wet that there's a whole bunch of water in the bottom of your tray. So there should just be a little bit, and then it's pretty easy to press the soil blocker in and create your blocks. And I liked it quite a bit. So after creating a couple trays, this is what it looks like inside the greenhouse. This is a capillary mat on the bottom to keep the blocks wet. And you can see this one, the tray fits really nicely with the entire mat sitting underneath. This block, I accidentally got some water on it, and it just kind of started crumbling like if you were pouring water on a sandcastle. So the capillary mat keeps the blocks moist. And to plant the seeds, if they were big seeds, I would just put them in the hole, and if they were tiny, I would fill the hole and then put the seeds on top. So here is the garden last week, so week 3. It has lots of stuff is starting to come up. The night temperatures are starting to get a little bit warmer, so I got lots of the Hawkeye turnips are starting to come up, which is great. And on the other side, there is peas coming up, and I'm not sure why they're kind of coming to the surface here, but they are all starting to sprout, which is good to see. I wasn't sure how my seeds were going to be because they were a little bit older, but they're definitely coming up and liking the weather that we've been having right now. So good to see. Now this little garden tent I put over the Chinese cabbage, and you can see they're coming up a lot more than the other stuff. So they're doing good, and unfortunately there is some bindweed right here also liking the tent and coming up. But this is my first time trying this little tent, and I really like it. The plants seem to grow pretty well underneath it. It has a mesh top, and the sides will unzip so you can just collapse it down when you're done. Underneath my hoops here, I have the cabbage plants that I had planted out. So they're just getting a little bit of protection underneath these hoops, but they seem to be liking it underneath the little bit of protection. I have 4 cabbage plants out here, so doing pretty good. And then here on the end is where my potatoes are, and they are just starting to come up here with week 3. Just a little bit of green is starting to come up, so those great big potato sprouts are working just fine. They're coming up, which is good to see. So that's the first bed, and on to the second garden bed. The garlic is still growing, and I've got a whole lot of bindweed, unfortunately, coming up with the garlic. That'll need to be pulled out. But the garlic seems to be pretty happy where it's at. On this side is the carrots, and we just got little tiny bits of carrots are just starting to sprout on this side. So a whole bunch of little ones. And also bindweed is in the carrots, so that'll be a little tricky to pull out to not disturb the carrots. Then I put 2 hoops on this side, so this one obviously isn't too watertight. I've used this one for a couple different seasons, so it's getting a little worn and used, but I just put it over the bok choy and little plants like that to give them a little more of a heat, so they could be coming up. And there's quite a few coming up. I'm gonna have to probably thin down my line so that they're not too crowded, but this little tent works pretty good for that. This side there's just a little broccoli plant that had just started, so I put it out here. But my main 2 broccoli plants that I have are on the other side here. And they were a little warm, so they were a little droopy, but doing pretty good underneath the little bit of cover. So they were liking it outside too. And then the rest I have are onions that I had started from seeds. So they're just kind of laying down and trying to get established again from being transferred. But hopefully we'll have quite a bit of onions over here on this side. So that's what's all under my hoops on this garden bed. And then on the outside here we have some, it is a Chinese green. I forget the real name of it, but it was just one of those vegetable greens. So, and of course bindweed is over here too. But everything is starting to come up for week 3 and looking good. So I'll show you what's going on this week, which is week 4 of the garden. Our night temperatures have continued to get warmer. We're getting closer to our last frost date for the spring here, and so I got way more turnips, and these are peas right here. The peas are really starting to come up. They're liking everything. I took the tin off the Chinese cabbage, and they're looking really good. I'll probably have to thin those so they're not too crowded too. The cabbages are looking happy over here too, and I have a lot more potatoes sprouting, so we'll probably get a lot of potatoes, hopefully. They're definitely coming up this week. On the second bed this week, I have, of course, the garlic, and then in between I had put out some spinach, and I wasn't sure if they were coming up, but they're starting to come up. The seeds are a little bit older, so I got a little bit of spinach coming up. We'll see how they do, if it gets too hot or not. And a whole lot more of the carrots are starting to come out. You can see them starting to look a little bit more like carrots. And I had to pull the bindweed out, so hopefully I didn't disturb them too much trying to do that. But over there's some more of the greens that are coming up. And the bok choy on this side, you can really see it. It's harder to see the purple bok choy that I have here in the middle, but there's a nice line of purple bok choy there in the middle and 2 green ones. On the other side is the onions, and they're looking just the same. Haven't stood up or anything yet, but we should have a lot of bok choy. And the 2 broccoli plants. Last year I had 4 or 6, and there was a lot of broccoli from these plants, so hopefully we get that again. Not too much though, that's why I only have 2. So that's the garden for this week, and thanks for watching.